Thanks, it's nice to be here. I'm very honored. It's awesome being selected for SANS DFIR. It's just so many talented people here. So it's a little nerve-wracking, but it's great. It's such an honor. All right, so we're going to talk about deleted evidence. So when we talk about deleted evidence, it's important to talk about how that evidence was deleted. And then if the evidence is gone, are there artifacts of the file creation or file access? So let's get started. There's these cool slide transitions in between each slide, thanks to George Lucas's, the way Star Wars was filmed originally.
I had to watch a YouTube video like 3 times to find all the different transitions. Then luckily PowerPoint has them built in, so really you too can make Star Wars on PowerPoint.
Yeah, so if you don't like them, blame George Lucas. Anyway, so just quick introduction. I'm Mary Singh. I've been with Mandiant about 6.5 years, dealing with, I don't like APT, but more advanced type of attackers, and financial cases, and more recently, healthcare cases.
I'm Dave Pany. I've been with Mandiant for about 3 years, also doing targeted attacks. I love credit card malware and PFI investigations. And just a quick shout out to my university, Bloomsburg, before I came from Mandiant. I graduated from Bloomsburg. There are a couple alumni and a professor in the audience. So if anyone is looking for fresh out of school talent that is ready to be molded into the upcoming presenters of the summit, get in touch.
Yep, definitely. Okay, so how are files deleted? Of course, there's many, many ways files can be deleted. I'm covering the top 3 ways that I think are relevant. When an attacker creates a file, it can be deleted automatically. Either self-destruction is built into malware, or there's a file dropper that automatically deletes itself. Sometimes antivirus will delete the malware, especially if you're responding to a case, like 6 months, a year later. Antivirus all of a sudden says, hey, there's something bad here. Yeah, thanks, antivirus. But AV will automatically delete some of the files. Sometimes an attacker will drop an initial piece of malware. AV actually detects it, and then the attacker gets upset and creates a new variant of the file. So if you're ever analyzing antivirus logs, don't get comfortable and think, oh, well, AV caught it, we are good to go. Sometimes the attacker will come in and create a different version, or I've seen it where the actual original dropper for the backdoor is quarantined, but then the backdoor itself is left behind. And then I've also seen it where an attacker will just manually delete a file, either through a script or just typing a command to delete it. And I have seen malware in the recycle bin, believe it or not, so always check there just in case the attacker is sloppy.
Have you ever seen malware deleted with a well-placed laser through the exhaust hatch?
No.
It might make it explode, I don't know.
That would be cool.
Next time.
Maybe one day, maybe next year. So, but these are the different ways attackers delete files. And then, of course, files can't always be recovered. You all know this. It really depends on how the file was deleted and how quickly the file system reads and writes data and the level of activity. Also, if you're dealing with a solid-state drive, that is a lot more challenging because the evidence won't be left behind. So it makes me sad, but it's the reality of the game. So if the file can't be recovered, all hope is not lost. We can look at artifacts of file creation. There's a lot of these, but we'll go over some of the basics. MFT, Jared Atkinson talked about this yesterday. If you were at his talk, there's a lot more details to the MFT, but I wanted to make it look like a cool lightsaber. So those are the details you get right there. But so there's standard information. That's what you see in the Windows GUI, the dates, file times. There's also a file name attributes and the corresponding data. And then there's a lot of cool stuff like USN numbers, which I'll talk about. And, but if the file is under 700 bytes, then the file data could be retained in the original MFT record. It's very nice if you have an attacker configuration file or a small output file. So sometimes if the file is deleted by the attacker and the MFT entry is left behind, we can pull that data out. So a little more in depth on that. I had to stick with the Star Wars theme. So pretend you had a hand, and that hand is cut off. So if the file is deleted and then like the hand gets replaced with a robot hand, then you're kind of like hosed because the robot hand overwrote that data. But if there's no robot hand, then you might be able to recover the data from the MFT record. It's a stretch, I know. But you know, if you'll remember this though. So how many people use EnCase in the room? I won't judge you, don't worry. I use EnCase. I love EnCase. So if you ever look in the lost files directory, there's like the tree structure, lost files at the bottom. EnCase pulls that information from the MFT, the inactive records. Okay?
Yeah. So not only does every file have its own MFT record with standard info and file name attributes of what's going on in there, every directory says, hey, I need a list of what's in my directory, you know, all the files in there. So it has this really cool concept. You might have seen a $I30 file if you're using an access data product or an index record that we'll look at here. But it's basically a list of everything that's in the folder or in the directory with the file name, the timestamps. And you may have used Willie's tool, indexparse.py or .python, to parse this information from a non-resident index record. Just like how files can be resident in the MFT, so can these big lists. If they're small enough, they'll be resident. If they're too big, they'll be non-resident somewhere on the disk. And you can talk to Jared about finding data runs and all kinds of good stuff. But we'll take a look at, this is an example on the screen of what a non-resident index record looks like. And got your Hotline Bling swag, so it's pretty exciting when you can parse this stuff. I know you guys are really excited you brought your binoculars. This is what an MFT record looks like. You'll see at the top your file 0 header, and then you'll see a standard information attribute, 2 file name attributes. One's actually a short file name. You'll see the 0x90 attribute, which is, I think, index root attribute, and that would be where your resident list of files is contained. In this scenario, though, it's too big, so we have an A0 and a B0 attribute. The A0 says, hey, go look at this non-resident section. But if we look down at the bottom, we see all those Fs. So this is the F and end of our MFT record, you know, but there's a lot of stuff going on under there. So let's take a closer look. If we look, we can see these file names, or whatever, cannons and shield. Pretty interesting. Has anybody ever had a keyword search hit in the MFT, and you say, yeah, I'll just use the most cool MFT parser I've ever seen, and it'll pull out that information from that file, and you got nothing? That's how I found this first. I had a keyword search hit. It was my first week on the job at FireEye. I was on site, super excited, found this malware. I'll just parse the MFT, nothing. Really sad, really embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. So I started doing some research, and I found out that if you look, you can kind of see these 32 bytes of data there that may stand out to some of you who've looked at an MFT in hex before, may not. But those are going to be timestamps. So I found out that what happened in this scenario is the index record, that list of files, was resident at one point in time, and it filled up this space, and then that list grew so big it had to move out to the disk, so it's now non-resident, but that slack space never got overwritten, so we can carve this information out. And at the top, you can see that we were able to recover the timestamps for shield.exe, some flags, the file sizes, and the name. For cannons, we didn't know, there were no timestamps left, they got overwritten, but we can know that there was likely a file or directory named cannons in this parent directory. So that's pretty cool. Very exciting, always a win.
All right, so I'm going to talk about journal. Is Dave Cohen in here? Don't judge me if you are. Crap. All right, I was hoping he didn't come, but so Dave Cohen, sorry. I apologize. You can talk to me and yell at me later, but the journal it was created for stability purposes, and there's a lot of really interesting information in the journal. How many people have parsed the journal before, UsnJrnl? A few of you. I mean, it's not. It's newish, but a lot of times we stick with our old ways of analysis, but the journal is awesome. You can pull out all kinds of good information, especially if attackers have deleted evidence of their activity. There's a lot of reason flags within the journal entries itself, and shockingly, the reasons actually match with what happened. So file create means the file was created, and file deleted is file deleted. So that's awesome. So Microsoft is very helpful. But the journal is overwritten fairly often, so unless it's a more recent hack, then it may or may not be useful to you. If the records have been overwritten. You can carve them out of unallocated space or pull information from volume shadow copy. But Corey Harrell, I don't think he's here this year, but he has a good blog entry. Dave Cohen's blog is always great. And then I use, for the next slide, the case study, I've used Joachim's UsnJrnl to CSV parser, which is very helpful. So in this case, I parsed the journal. It was 400,000 lines, which really was not fun to analyze. But it parsed out things like file name, timestamp, MFT reference, that's helpful, and then the corresponding reason codes, I just focused in on file creations, renames, things like that. And then conveniently, we had a Windows Defender log, which Dave will talk about, where we had a file name to go off of. So based on that search, I found, oh, there's this hux.exe, and then timeline analysis, there's this other malware called Kylo. Great, I'm good to go. There's this MFT parent reference number with corresponding to the MFT that I found out, okay, the file was originally in C Windows. So I went and did a filtering on Excel, my favorite analysis tool, and Excel showed me there was even more data within C Windows. There was these two files which I knew about. It's kind of cool to see like all of the activity that goes on behind the scenes. That surprised me. But I saw this rename, which is kind of weird. Does anyone know what that is? AA.AA? What?
Austin doesn't count.
Yeah, no Mandiant people. Anyone else know? No one knows? Wow. All right. Well, Dave will talk about it in a little bit. So hold on. It's exciting. So, but based on timeline analysis, I was just focused on January 30th. On January 31st, there was more activity, and there's this test directory created, and then an additional PS exec. So just a note on that, just don't put your blinders on if you find something bad. It's easy to say, oh, anything that happened within an hour, let's focus on that. But you never know. The attacker might come back a day, a week, a month later. So don't put your blinders or blast shield down. Make sure you look at all the evidence. All right. It's going to click 4 times. I know it's going to go. OK, there you go.
Awesome. So for those of you who may not have been familiar with the AAAA, BBBBB, has anybody used SDELETE, the SysInternals tool? A couple? I don't know if Mark is in the room or in the building today, but he's got some pretty cool tools. So SDELETE is a sysinternals tool, very similar to like shred on Linux. It allows you to overwrite data, and it'll also overwrite the file name consecutively. If it's a 5-letter file name, it'll do 5 A's, then the 3 A's for the extension, all the way down B, C, D, E, F to Z. Every once in a while, we do see attackers do this as an anti-forensics technique. And it leaves files that we parse from index records, maybe using a tool like Willy's from the Slack space or finding them in Slack, or even MFT records for files named ZZZZZ. But every once in a while, you'll see ones that stop at F or R. So that's kind of interesting. The file contents, unless you can find a fragment from a previous time or go back in the shadow copies, probably unrecoverable. They've been wiped pretty well. So it's, oh, Dave, this is terrible. Attackers are always going to use SDELETE. You're never going to be able to find out what happens. That's the end of the world. Don't fear. There are a couple artifacts we can look for. Similar to clearing event logs, when you run SDELETE, it kind of leaves its own artifact behind. In the registry, you have to accept a EULA whenever you run a sysinternals tool. Same thing with PSExec and all the other ones. That will create a nice registry in the user hive of the user who ran SDELETE. So you'll be able to tie it to a specific user, which is always helpful. And you can also look at your UsnJrnl, like Mary just showed us the example. You can look at your parsed MFT records. You can look at your parsed index records. Everything that we're going to talk about today, you can look for those AAA, BBBBB, ZZZZ. And this is a neat regex that I didn't create by myself. I tried to create, and then I got some help from Ian All and Jay Taylor's, like lookbacks or something crazy in there. But that should find 3 letters prepended by 3 of the same letters. I'm not sure which direction you guys can see my pointing in. So not all fear is lost. You can try and find some hope in that example.
Yeah, and it's important. At first I thought, well, let's just look for zzz.zzz and then call it a day. But for some reason, the tool doesn't always end on Z. Sometimes
if anybody knows
W.
why, find us afterwards.
Yeah, we have no idea why. But sometimes it ends on W or X or whatever. So the log file, it's similar to UsnJrnl where there's, it tracks things that happen on a file. It contains a lot more detail, like changes to file attributes. and things that the journal doesn't track. But there's only 32,000 records, so there's not as much history as the journal is. So when you're doing analysis, look at both artifacts. You might find something in one file, but maybe not in the other one. That doesn't track specific changes, but if there's like a date change or something else, then you might see that in the corresponding log file. And you could relate it back to the MFT, so the log file can be linked back to a specific file name or directory. In this case, we found there was a RAR file, and then the attacker renamed it to a text file and deleted it, and all of this activity was recorded in log file, conveniently for us. So, all right, we talked about artifacts of file creation. Next, we'll do file access.
Awesome. So a lot of these artifacts may or may not have been seen before. One of my favorite ones that's been really useful lately is known as CCM recently used apps. If you've turned on a computer in the past year, you may have heard about this new hot topic called WMI, all over Black Hat last year. Super popular, lots of awesome things you can do with it. But something that we've seen for a while are keyword search hits in this file OBJECTS.DATA. OBJECTS.DATA is part of the repository for all of the WMI stuff that goes on in a system. And we see, oh, like here's a file name in this repository that's kind of surrounded by all this random gobbledygook. What's going on here? What can we do with it? Turns out that one of these artifacts is known as CCM recently used apps. It is part of the SCCM sysadmin server setup that usually takes place in an enterprise. So if you're doing this as a law enforcement basis, on a one-off computer, you may not have this artifact. And if SCCM is being utilized, you'll also need software metering to be enabled. Software metering is a tool for sysadmins to say, yeah, this application gets used a lot. Maybe we should renew the license, or no one ever uses this. It's not so cool. But either way, it creates an awesome forensic artifact for us in this object.data file. Again, it's probably only enterprise only. You may have stumbled across this as a keyword hit. So we'll talk about keyword hits in a little bit. But right now, I've seen two known structures. One of them I don't have pictured is an XML base with nice tags that's easy to read, very cool. The other one is just delimited by 2 null bytes, as you'll see on the screen there. But let's talk about what you see in this artifact when you can pull it out and read it. You'll see stuff like the file name, the file path. You also see some really cool stuff like last used time, which I believe is when the file completed executing last. You'll see an associated username, super cool. If you know how to parse it properly, you'll get a launch count. Very awesome. Kind of like Prefetch, it'll tell you how many times it has run. You'll get this other information that we'll take a look at, such as the file description, file version, the company name. Those are going to be found in your PE header, so in the metadata header of the executable. Super, super valuable. We'll show you why in a second. But you'll find it here in the WMI repository, this object.data file on the screen. There's also this inventory store file that we've seen on Windows Vista or Windows 7 and Plus on some systems. It has this artifact. If anybody knows what the heck inventory store.sdf is, I want to know. Come find me. But it's a compact SQL database that you can open up in SQL Server, extract the clear text out, and then look for these keyword structures. It's awesome, really cool. This is what it looks like after you're able to parse it. So what stands out here? Obviously, the yellow highlights stand out. The parser doesn't do that. But what stands out is the lack of information for the attacker files. You'll see Adobe and Citrix all have all those metadata fields filled out. Super easy, to see, and you can kind of validate that. But when you start looking at the fields that don't have the information filled out, I guess attackers don't care. They don't want to put their company name in there. They don't want to put their malware version in there. I don't know. Maybe they don't have a nice release, cadence where they want to have, README notes. But either way, awesome artifact for us using kind of an anomaly detection. Let's just call it machine learning, using our brains and make it really cool. But that stands out. You can find it's interesting. Then you can search for known file names. There's the file path. You can use your timeline skills with the timestamps. You can use a user account that you know is bad. All kinds of awesome stuff. So Dave, how do we get this really cool information out? You're telling us that it's in there. It's this weird structure. Right now, you can use the Flare Team's Python sim setup, which you can install on a Linux system pretty easily. And you can run this sample script that I kind of created. Please note that will only pull out allocated records that are actively being used in the WMI repository. It turns out that there are a lot of records that are not allocated anymore and that Python sim cannot see. So you have to kind of carve them out. I have a carver written. I'm just waiting on somebody to tell me my Python code is PEP8 enough to put it on like the Mandiant blog. So keep an eye out for that. It's coming. You'll just run it on an objects data file. It'll carve it out, pull out all the information you've seen before, and hopefully be useful. So keep an eye out for that. Another cool one that I know less about, but I've seen this in the objects.data and inventory store files as well, is file system file. Just another way that I think in this time it's WMI actually keeping track of files that are present on the system at some point in time. No evidence to indicate that these files executed. They were just on the system, got recorded. I've never actually found malware in this data structure, which is interesting. And I have found lots of malware in the CCM recently used apps. But similarly, you can get some good information such as company name, the PE metadata, which might help stuff stand out, a language, path size, and they're found in the exact same locations that I've seen as the objects.data inventory store files. Also, they have an XML structure that I've seen in the past and a null byte version that I've seen as well. So they're out there. If you get a keyword search hit, you may want to just track this down or contact someone and say, hey, what was that weird guy who did that talk about that thing that one time? And try and get some more information about what you're looking at. This is a case study based on an APT29, big bad APT29 you may have heard of, and Windows Defender. Turned out Windows Defender is so good at recording that APT29 is on your system, so bad at stopping them. It's like, hey, I see your APT29 malware. Nice. I'm going to let you go. It was amazing. It was amazing, and I'll show you screenshots, but it was super awesome at recording that files were present on the system. You may find Windows Defender logs at that path there, mplog date.log. And does anybody here know what Microsoft anti-malware is? I'm going to find Troy. So I need to ask somebody. I think it's just Azure's implementation, but I'm not sure. So if anybody has a clear example, let me know. But it has the same kind of stuff. It says, oh, we found this file in the system. We scanned it. Jar Jar, squeeze me. He's really excited to be there. But you'll get a keyword hit. This is how I found this log, actually, with a keyword hit for this attacker file name, 5442.exe. Some of you may have seen this malware. It was a super active phishing campaign last year that they were sending out this executable file. Awesome. Have a timestamp of when the scan started. So now I know at that time this file was present on the system. I don't know if it executed. I don't know, if it was being interacted with. I don't know if Windows Defender was just scanning it for fun or because it wanted to, take a nice inventory access of all the files on the system. But this is how I felt after I saw that. I was like, if I had 2 extra hands, I would do it, but I don't. So I said, okay, I have this giant text file log. I'll just scroll up and scroll down. Oh my gosh. So many more attacker tools that I didn't know about before. Now I've seen them. Windows Defender, you're so average. You would be great if you would have stopped them, but because you didn't, you're just average. So we can see all these other files in the same directory with timestamps. Really, really cool. Chrome, PW grab, SDELETE. You guys may have heard of that too. Really cool stuff, and this was a great way to find these artifacts. That's how I felt afterwards. I was like, yeah, guys, thank you, Windows Defender. And the client was super happy that we found some more activity.
So dreamy.
Yeah, Mary's kind of in love with Han.
I love Han Solo.
But so what we did was we built a custom. There's a lot of talk about automation. So I kind of like to do Python to just rip the timestamps and the paths out. It was super easy to see that at this time this file was present on the system during a scan. And I got these file paths. There were a lot of records in between there that I kind of filtered out. But we were able to identify very suspicious files that we didn't know about before because they were no longer on the system and other artifacts hadn't recorded them. So Mary mentioned earlier about antivirus logs, whether it's Windows Defender. I've seen like Symantec say, oh, hey, I have this ransomware file that's overwriting the Symantec program files. I'm not going to stop it though. I'm like, why would you not stop that? But awesome ways, check your AV logs for anything.
Yeah, McAfee too is famous for, hey, I see this bad thing happening, but I'm not going to do anything.
So nice of them to let us know, though.
Yeah, it's very nice, very, very helpful.
Gives us work.
All right, so next is app compat cache. I had a whole talk on this in SANS DFIR 2013, so look it up if you want more details. best conference ever. But it really is like shim cache. We use it, every host we analyze at Mandiant, we always look at the app compat cache or shim cache. It records all kinds of good information like last modified time, last execution time, recorded in these keys. The way it works is when the file is executed or created in Vista Plus, that file metadata is put into like a data structure in memory, and then when the system is shut down, that data structure is written to the system registry hive. So some tools you can use to parse that out is shim cache parser. If you're on a server or you're looking at something live that an attacker is on, but the system hasn't been shut down, you can use the volatility plugin to pull out that shim cache information from memory. For an example, we knew Anakin.exe was on the system. We had no idea what happened, how it got on there. And then parsing shim cache, we saw OB1 was responsible for Anakin.
It's also recently proven that if you submit a bug for shimcacheparser.python, we'll have it fixed in like 20 minutes. So
yeah, that's true. So Windows Prefetch, I debated putting this in. It's an oldie but goodie. It records last 128 files executed. So if an attacker is long gone, this might retain evidence that malware was executed. And even accessed files within 10 seconds of execution, you can pull that information as well. So there's a good prefetch parser here. It covers XP all the way to Windows 10. Windows 10, they changed the format because they like to mess with us. But this parser takes care of that for you, which is nice. So some final thoughts. There's a lot more artifacts that we just don't have time to cover. But always research your keyword hits, especially the EnCase people in here. If you have keyword hits under this weird evidence you've never seen before, then look into it. Look at research webinars. I don't need to tell you this, you're here at the conference, but other presentations are helpful, and always be learning about new technology and think like the attacker. One of our red team guys concerned me, and he said, I'm going to look at your presentation and adapt my red team techniques to not record any of this information we're talking about.
We'll find some other way to find
That's comforting, but yeah, attackers are sneaky, and we have to adapt to their techniques.
And definitely the keyword search hits. A lot of these artifacts are found by keyword search hits. Figure, if you can find someone who can do the reverse engineering or the little bit of deobfuscation, please find it. And if you're at the panel today, please document it. Let's get some blog posts out about this information. I promise I'm working on one on the CCM RUs and RUA, so super important.
Definitely.
And follow us on Twitter. You may know me as that guy who just followed you like 20 minutes ago on Twitter. I've been trying to follow everybody I possibly could. So
popular guy. So are there any questions? Or
so you mentioned depending on how the file was deleted, is there any indicators that tell you how the file was deleted so we know how much time to spend trying to recover it?
That's a good question. That's why we covered SDELETE. So if an attacker tries to securely delete, they're obviously being a little more advanced than just manually deleting it.
I've actually, recently we had a case where the attacker, rather than do SDELETE, they were just copying a large file that was a system file over on top of their existing file. So that pretty much overwrites all the content. And then they would just rename it and delete it. Very similar to SDELETE, but very sneaky. We judge our time spent on if it's worth recovering based on how much budget our client has, if they want to send us an image and spend this time, because it is very time intensive to try, and it's hit or miss, right? So, but if we see something like SDELETE or an overwriting, we're going to know it's going to be less likely, but possible maybe.
Sometimes based on the file name, you kind of know what it is anyway. Attackers aren't very good about renaming their stuff, so.
Any tools, if you're detonating malware in a lab, any tools better to immediately recover? Happen to catch it in play?
Scalpel, I've heard, is good to recover files from like raw disk stuff. Yeah, Scalpel is good.
Also like bulk extractor, depending on the type of file.
Yeah,
like archives can be pretty good at recovering or pointing you in that direction. Bulk extractor, it's fast.
Yeah.
You mentioned the PE header metadata that shows up in the OBJECT.DATA file. I did not see the compile date in the table there. Does that get put into there, or is it not present?
I don't know if I heard. You said for PE you didn't see a compile date put in there? Okay, yeah, I mean, we sometimes use if we are able to recover, I don't know if I'm answering this, if we are able to recover the file, we do look at the compile date to find
I think he meant if in the CCM recently used apps, sometimes you don't see it there. I don't remember, there's a list of like 40 items that are in there, and It may or may not be in there. I can follow up with you. All the fields are documented in the blog post in the script that'll be coming out, but I don't remember, but maybe. I'll follow up. I apologize.
Yeah, if the compile date's in there, that would be a cool thing.
Sure.
All right, I think we're going to have to end it there. We've got lunch coming up. A big round of applause for Mary and Dave. Thank you.